Hello and welcome to 2018 Catchup. So, before I started Drop or Not, I didn't really do this watch every single show thing, and I missed a bunch of stuff from winter. A bunch of stuff that was popular, a bunch of stuff that was not so popular. So, gonna catch up on what I missed. Also gonna be going through, there was a couple shows that either weren't subbed or that I just forgot to watch from other seasons, so I'm gonna be watching those as well. And also, this is a new thing. If I drop the show and you think that I should give it another try, you think it's worth a second chance, or that I dropped it before, I really got a good sense for what makes it good, well, comment that and I'll give it a second chance. I'm willing to give shows another try. I'm definitely not perfect. I can't say that I always make the right judgment call, but I do the best I can. So the first show that we're going to be starting this off with is Hakata Tonkotsu Ramens. This is a show about serial killers. I could see myself watching this. It's a perfectly fine show. It's got a fun jazzy soundtrack and entertaining premise, and it seems like it could be worth, it could be a fun, moderately fun experience. But really, I find my biggest issue is just that the show visually is not good looking at all. I don't like the character designs. They're in the weird in between of trying to look a little more realistic, but also having a more stylized approach. And it's just really unattractive to the eyes. The color palette is just really pukey, I guess is how I would describe it. All the shots have this really bad post-production lighting effect on them that I hate. I wish shows would stop using it because it looks like garbage. Background art is really bland, and the animation is quite lackluster, when it even is animated, that is. There's some pretty questionable walk cycles in this show. So all that, it's just not fun to look at, and this is one of those shows that's very much I don't get the sense that I'm gonna get that much out of it other than a moderately entertaining, fun experience. And if I'm gonna go for just something that's purely for just having fun and being entertaining, I want something that's gonna be gripping me, not just narratively, also from a story perspective. I just feel like this specific premise really needs an extra layer to sell me on it. And then also, I'm at about 6 minutes. The character who's the assassin, he goes up, and the place he's supposed to go is to this crime scene. The second he walks up, it just so happens two characters are standing there, and they give all the important exposition of who the guy was that died, how he died, and what his profession was. Yeah, and that just annoyed me. And at that point, I was like, okay, I think I've had enough of this show. So yeah. All right, Toji no Miko. It has some sort of dragon centipede thing in the first minute. It is possibly the worst CG I've seen all year in the opening thing, and now there's this battle sequence happening, and it looks like none of the characters are on the same plane of existence, and the perspective is completely shot. It looks like garbage. Nope, thank you. Alright, I'm 3 minutes into Sword Gai the Animation, and already I've got a list this long of problems. First off, we know they've literally done nothing to establish characters at all. It's just been pretty much non-stop exposition. We've shifted between several characters, but none of them have any personality. Literally, their only purpose is just to spout information at us, which is not entertaining. Alongside that, the show is pretty ugly. I mean, it's not as big an offender as the previous show, but still pretty heavily lacking in the visuals department, especially on the side of effects work. The opening theme had some real questionable CGI, and then this opening sequence describing the sort of core premise, or at least like an opening, this comment from the narrator or whatever, had a really ugly looking fire effect in the background. So there's that. Then the sound design in this show is so bad. There's one scene where they're like in these mines and the guys are like going at it with their picks, right? And it sounds like someone's tapping on like a glass for the sound effect. And it's also not mixed correctly, so it just sounds completely out of place. In general, the mixing seems to be really off. Like, all the audio levels of the different people seem like not correctly set. And then the opening theme, I already wanted to drop it just listening to the opening, but I was like, okay, because this show actually, instead of having like a before opening or no opening at all, like most first episodes have, it just goes straight with the opening from the beginning. And the opening is pretty lame song, and I can't stand it, especially because the singer sounds like he doesn't care, like he's not even trying. He sounds congested and like he doesn't care, like he's not trying at all, and also like he's standing 10 feet away from the mic because his voice is really quiet. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Not a fan. So I made it through about 16 minutes of episode 1 of Ito Junji Collection, which is more than I expected. Yeah, I mean, people were really hammering on this show, but I don't know. It was decently entertaining for a good bit of time. It's not scary, which I think is why people were upset, because it's definitely not scary. It's weird, but that's very different from scary. This first episode is focusing on like this dude who's laying curses on people, and he's kind of like this weirdo creep. And it's kind of funny because he's just so bizarre and goofy as a character, and then his curses are just as much equally bizarre and goofy. Like a giant spider, or like having this guy like hibernate in the woods. It's pretty silly. And like his sort of family dynamic is also kind of amusing. Like he's like harassing his sister, and his brother comes in. The way it's paced, it feels like it's just trying to be funny. Even the soundtrack definitely feels like it's more of like a comedic type of score. And even the visuals aren't that bad. Like, this is definitely not the peak, but like, it's competent. Like, yeah, there's nothing here that was like, there were a couple shots where I kind of chuckled because it looked bad, but for the most part, like, it like demonstrates what it needs to, and it at least has like some sort of aesthetic beyond just like generic anime look. Like, there is a style to it, even if it's not necessarily a great one. So yeah, I was having fun with it. I was chuckling. It was amusing, but as the episode progressed, I felt like I was just kind of getting tired of it. Like I said, there's nothing. I don't really think that there's anything about this that is really nearly as bad as I was led to believe, but there's nothing all that good about it either. It is amusingly weird, but like, I can get amusingly weird elsewhere and more weird. Like this isn't quite weird enough, and I hate also the sound design is garbage. This is another show with really bad sound design. They think making weird like sounds like that equates to creepy sound effects. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't like it in my ears. Also, the voice acting is not good. That's another big detractor. I feel like this could be sold pretty well if it had a better voice acting. Like, it feels like some of the characters are in this weird middle point between like hammy and not hammy enough, where it's like you either go full with it or like don't bother. But as it stands right now, it just sounds really amateur. So it just overall, my interest started waning as the episode went on. I was like, okay, I get it, but I don't know if I want to watch a full series of this, even if I was entertained for a good 15 minutes or so. So that's my thoughts. Alright, Hakyuu, Houshin, Engi is the epitome of all these things that I detest about these low-budget action anime. Opens with a dramatic action sequence, which we have no reason to care about because we don't know any of these characters, in a really vague setting that doesn't have anything particularly defining about it, but it's just sort of like a random amalgamation of the destroyed rocks. And then the animation is bad. It tries to do cool perspective shots and stuff with like dynamic camera movements, but the visuals themselves are bad. So and then there's another thing. These types of shows tend to really try and cover up the fact that their animation is lackluster by throwing as many possible things on the screen as they can. Every, post-production effect, have the camera shaking around, like it's got arthritis, like the cameraman has the arthritis, have like different like rocks or whatever moving across the screen, all sorts of effects, a really gaudy lighting effect, just everything you physically can throw onto one scene at the same time, so that it's a completely clustered mess, visual mess, that you can't make anything distinct out, and it looks like a steaming pile. Yeah, bad. Also, the character designs are really ugly. They've got like these like super pointy long noses. Not a fan. I somehow watched good 10 minutes of Death March, which was like the show I remember that everyone was on the hate train for. Like, this is the worst thing ever. I guess when you're like me and you're watching every single single thing that's airing, or at least trying it, it's like this isn't even close to the worst show of the year. Not even close. There's like a competent story. The sound design is fine. The voice acting is decent. The soundtrack is passable. Like, it's a show, at least. It's been put together. And I can kind of see the appeal with this show. It's very much like this. It asks nothing of you. Like, it requires no deeper mental engagement whatsoever. I was just sort of sitting here chilling out, and it was kind of going in one ear out the other, but not necessarily in a bad way. It wasn't really obnoxious. It wasn't annoying. It was just kind of there. But ultimately, it's not good. It's not good. First off, I really hate how they name drop twice. He says time to start the death march before the OP starts, But then he makes another reference to the Death March. And that one doesn't work nearly as well the second time, and it's also kind of like, oh, really? You're gonna do this again? Why? It's kind of cringy. But then also the visuals are pretty big detractor from it. The characters never look like they're on the same plane as their backgrounds. Like, there's a really messed up sense of perspective, and the background art itself is really gross looking. It's so bland and unpleasant to look at. And the character designs aren't a whole lot better. They're pretty bad as well. So it's kind of those two aspects really hold it back, and narratively it didn't really do anything that was grabbing me. It was just kind of like a generic Isekai setup. He's an overworked guy approaching, his 30s, and he's going to be transported to a magic video game world, and yeah, exciting. It didn't offend me, but it didn't really interest me either. Alright, this long one, Shinkansen Henkei Robo Shinkalion the Animation. I watched the first episode of this, and it was good. I liked it a lot, actually, which I really wasn't expecting to, because it's got like 6 on now. No one's watching it, no one's talking about it, which is to be expected because it's a kids show. Kids shows tend to not pull in the numbers. Speaking of, I've got to go back and finish Wako Kame Shogakuse since it's finished now. But staying on topic, this show is still airing. It's got about 50 episodes out, which means, I don't know, maybe I'll watch an episode here and there. I generally prefer things to be finished, though, so I don't know if I'll get around to wrapping this one up unless I get myself to start following it more regularly, but there's so much to catch up on. Either way, I liked it. Character designs are really cute. It's got a really nice color palette. It's just pleasing visually, and there's none of this extra obnoxious post-production. It's very flat, but not in a bad way. It takes a more cartoony aesthetic and is like, this is what we're going with. Their CG doesn't look the best, but it doesn't look terrible. It surprisingly works okay. Granted, first episode was just the setup. We haven't had a full-on action sequence yet. So I can't say with absolute certainty that the CG holds up, but from what I've seen of it, I think it works okay. It takes a more stylized approach, which is good. It doesn't try too hard to make it look anime. I mean, they are robots, so you have that sort of advantage. And yeah, it definitely doesn't look like the rest of the show. It looks a bit weird, but ultimately I think it holds up, and the way it's animated and stuff. And they also kind of try and make a distinction. There's usually a separation between scenes of the characters and scenes of the robots themselves. There's not a whole lot of interaction between the two different mediums, which I think helps keep it from feeling too... It helps that stylistic disconnect from really messing with you. Because what often happens is you have one of the 2D characters interacting with the CG character, and it looks really odd and weird and off-putting, and that's what really takes you out of it. But yeah, so the core premise is that these weird mysterious robots have come and started attacking, and the special task force for this use the advanced technology of this train system for transforming robots. It's a bit goofy. I don't know what it is with Japan and trains, but I feel like every single show the kid character is obsessed with trains, whereas in the West it's just the autistic boys obsessed with trains. It's not just a normal kids thing. It's the autistic thing is that kids is the kid that's into trains. Don't know why that is, but it's interesting. But either way, the little kid is obsessed with trains. Turns out that to operate this, they have like 3 of these robots, transforming robots that they use to fight the enemy robots. And you need a really high compatibility to operate them. 2 of them have drivers, but those robots were injured in the previous battle. They took in an enemy robot, but the robot that they destroyed starts reforming itself suddenly, and right as the boy comes in, because his dad is a secret agent working for the society, they discover that he has really high compatibility, and they're like, well, it's like the tension's high, we gotta use him, we have no other options, and so he gets in the robot, and that's how the episode ends. It's a bit goofy, but it's like, we got our premise, we gotta do it, and I think it did it about as well as you could reasonably expect it to. Nothing felt all that forced or out of place. It felt like it did a pretty good job of justifying the course of action. I mean, it's a little weird that, like, he gets his dad's pass card or whatever, like key card or whatever, and he needs to return it to his dad, and he does so by going into the secret parts of the building that can only be opened with the key card. Like, how would his dad have gotten in there if he didn't have that? So, like, why would you be looking in there, return it to him? But he's also a dumb kid, so dumb, curious kid, so it doesn't seem too unrealistic to believe that he would be, somewhat curious as to exploring the place, and then using this as an sort of excuse to pass off the blame or the guilt. But yeah, all the characters have really just cute designs, and quite distinctive ones. It's really interesting. It takes me back very much to my days watching, like, Saturday morning cartoons. It's very, very comfy in that sense. And it's also interesting to see ways certain things have developed, like, when he's waiting at the train stop, in one part of the episode, he comes across a friend from school, and she's apparently a famous YouTuber too, and she, like, shows her phone. She's like, look at how many views I got, and it's like 10 million views on a video of her cooking for the first time. And it's like the format of the app looks exactly like the YouTube app. Like, there's a freaking trending tab on the app. And that's just really interesting. Or, like, how he is, like, playing on his dad's tablet. Like, when he goes to wake him up, his dad's like, leave me alone, play on my tablet. It's really interesting to see stuff like that in the show, because, that is, kids are using technology like that nowadays. That's just a part of their life. So it's very interesting to see it through the realm of, like, being reflected in the media, more of, like, the cultural shift in modern days. The soundtrack is also really surprisingly great, and that's because the guy on it, let me pull up his name, Toshiyuki Watanabe. Yeah, this is a guy who did the soundtrack for Space Brothers, which is pretty memorable. It's got really strong themes, and yeah, Space Brothers soundtrack, pretty good. Apparently, he's also the son of a famous tokusatsu composer, and he did the score for the Mothra trilogy in the 90s. That's pretty neat. The soundtrack for the show is what kept me watching, because I turned it on and there's, like, CG robots, and I was, like, ready to check out. But then I'm hearing the soundtrack and I'm like, I want to hear more of this. And then I kept watching, and as I kept watching, other parts of the show grew on me. I was invested in the characters, because everyone is really likable and just fun. Like, I just want to see more of these characters. They all are very just kind and likable. No one's really annoying, which is oftentimes, I feel like, the case with a lot of kids shows, is that the characters tend to lean more on the edge of being very annoying, whereas this show surprisingly is really relaxed with its pacing. Like I said, you would usually expect there to be like a big robot fight in it. It's a kids show. Like that's the reason most kids are into it is because the robot fight. No, they spend the whole episode on appropriate setup for the robot fight that's coming next episode. Maybe they're just going for a cliffhanger action, but it definitely feels like they're pacing things out more appropriately. But back to the score, the instrumentation is great, and there's a lot of just musical things in it that appeal to me. Like I want to hear the progression of the song. I want to hear more and more of it. It just has me engaged, and it's this nice balance between like orchestral and then also like rock guitar at the more like action-y moments. It's a good balance between the two. It doesn't ever go too hammy on the guitar, but it's also not like too sort of straightforward to the point that it's just disconnected from the style of the show. Because sometimes when you have like those purely orchestral scores, it feels like it's only just background music, and it's not really trying to be a part of the show itself. It's not really investing itself in the stylistic flavor of the show. Whereas this is very much open to like taking in the fun, actiony, goofy attitude that the show has at points. And yeah, the instrumentation of it is just really well executed. The themes are compelling. Yeah, I liked it a lot. This was a great first episode. I want to watch more of it. Yeah. Killing Bites, it's almost entertaining, but it's also kind of stupid and gross. Just watch the Conviction video. It's not really worth your time. Yeah. Alright, I'm pretty sure I've spent more time trying to watch this show than actually watching it, by way more of a margin than it deserves. Nanatsu no Bitoku, I think it's basically like porn, but not quite. It's really ugly. Nothing about it appeals to me. The characters have really weird looking irises that I don't like. So I'm gonna drop it. I don't think anyone's gonna be too concerned over that one. Okay, remember when I said that other show had like the worst CG of the year? I think it has some competition. Yeah. GD Men. Where even get started? It's got like, it just looks so bad. Like I'm looking at the backgrounds right now, and it's like they stretched a low quality PNG over the whole thing for the ground texture, and it looks so terrible. Yeah, this is real bad. So I just watched all 12 episodes of Mame Neko. This is a cute little short show, 3.5 minutes an episode, but really 3 because of the 30-second long ED. It's delightful. It's Flash, or if you want to be technical about it, Adobe animation. So not the best visually, as in movement wise. It's mostly tweening based, and even that is on the lower spectrum of like what you can do with this type of animation. It's definitely nowhere near like, I don't know, Agretsuko, which is similar, style of animation, similar aesthetic too. But this is definitely a much lower staff budget resource project. Much less ambitious. But ultimately, it's really just fun. I just found myself, like, I would click and then suddenly the episode was over and I was like, it's over already? Like, and I just watched the whole thing from start to finish in pretty much, well, just one sitting. It was just fun and sweet. It centers on these two characters, Azuki and Daizu, two cats that get adopted, and it's sort of them acclimating to this new household. So we sort of like gradually learn about all the different people, because it's one big family, like the grandfather and the grandmother and the grandfather, the mother, the daughter and the son, who are siblings, and like you get a little bit of insight. Like the daughter's the one who adopts the cats. The mother's a little bit more like she's more strict. Grandfather character, he sort of like is the one who really does a lot of like the caring for the cats, and like the cats feel more comfy around him. The son character, he's like a big otaku, even though it doesn't appear so at first. The dad's like the typical businessman type. It's fun, and then they introduce some other characters later on, like a dog that believes he is a cat, and this really hilarious, affectionate pigeon couple. It just does everything really pleasantly, and it has these really nice watercolor background art, and then on top of that is the animation, which, though it's lacking from a movement perspective, like I do like the designs. They're extremely simplistic, but I think it works, and you sort of see, you get a little taste of what the like sort of original, I guess, idea behind it was. At least I'm assuming to be the original idea. In the ED sequence, there's like a full watercolor image of like the whole family, all done in the style of the backgrounds, and it looks really good. Stylistically, kind of reminds me of My Neighbor the Yamadas, the Ghibli film. It's going for that kind of look, and the colors are very, never too in your face, but still quite bright, and very much going for a more flat, pleasing look. Yeah, it's a very nice show. I would definitely recommend watching it. Like it's short, it's to the point, it's just pleasant and fun, and it's not much more than that, but it doesn't really need to be. So I watched the first 7 minutes of Chichibu de Buchichi. This is like a 25-minute short original animation that was made for the Saiba Railway, I think. It's like a promotional type thing, where they set, a story at a particular location, draw a lot of attention to the location, and, with the idea of it boosting tourism, and, consumer awareness. It's surprisingly good looking, it's well animated. The background art is not amazing, but it's competent. I like the character designs, particularly of the main girl. Voice acting is decent. The crux of it is, well, it's two things. I don't care for the soundtrack, especially. It has a pretty poor strings synth that's really obviously not actual orchestral string recording, and it sounds off. But on top of that, it just kind of feels soulless. There's just no heart to it. And part of this, maybe I'm a bit biased, but it's setting up. It does the whole arranged marriage with the boy who she actually has been pining for all this time. Oh, how about that? Right, first of all, I don't like arranged marriage stories. It's just a bias of mine. bug me. I don't like them. But I also hate this trope. It's just really tired and done to death. And then nothing about, like, the characters themselves was, like, grabbing me. It just felt like it was sort of going through the motions with this story outline, while also really blatantly trying to draw attention to the thing it's promoting. So it just, nothing about it was really selling me on watching the rest of it. Mitsuboshi Colors. So I watched the first 3 episodes of it, and it's good, with an addendum that I'm dropping it. I feel like this is one of the shows that I would have pretty easily kept up with if I was watching it at the time. I feel like it's in a similar state to, like, Tonari no Kyousoukyoku-san, the vampire loli show that's airing this season as a recording. But the thing is, these shows are just very in the moment type of things. Like, you watch it as it comes out, as it's, like, being talked about, and you don't. And I think the real thing is, like, because I don't really mind looking at stuff that's from the past, but it's also sort of a factor of, like, there's like the higher tier shows of this nature, which are, like, they generally hold up across time. So that'd be, like, I don't know, like Lucky Star, for, like, an example of, you know, a comfy, you know, humorous slice of life show, type of experience that's based around, you know, a main ensemble, usually about 3 characters. Then there's the seasonals, and usually there's at least one that does this type of premise good, but not good enough to the degree that it would really be worth going back to. But for the season, it's nice to have, you know, a little fun show that's lighthearted and you can just chill out to and enjoy. But the thing is, I already have that because there's one pretty much like every season. So there's no need to go back and watch a show of this type that isn't in the upper echelon. So with that established, let's actually talk about the show. So Mitsuboshi Colors, our main trio is, I don't remember the names, but it's essentially the character dynamic. It's the leader, or the one they call leader. They look to for, like, to force her to lead the way, but she's the most normal one. Usually she's sort of the straight man in the sense that she's not necessarily cynical to the other characters, but, like, her reactions are more of what you would expect from a normal person. She's very shy and easily embarrassed and gets emotional really easily. Then there's the girl who's just more tomboyish. She's constantly making reference to poop, and she's pretty. She's got a very go-get-em, like, let's do whatever, the first thing that comes into my head, I'm gonna do it without thinking of the consequences type of person. Then the blue-haired girl is more of a sadist. She plays video games constantly, but she's also very, like, she's sort of just goes with the flow, but is also really sadistic and constantly, like, suggests, like, whatever the most dark thing possibly is. And that's kind of like their whole characters. That's what the show sets up, and then the show just sort of runs with that. And they're not. This is kind of the point, but they are brats. Like, for a lot of the show, they are kind of being obnoxious. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's not so funny, but generally the show is, I think its humor does land fairly well. I think it particularly works because there's, like, this guy who owns a shop that they go to, and he's got a very sort of eccentric personality, but he's always going along with their antics. and that sells it. I think it's like when the adults are going along with their antics, I think that's what makes the funniest moments in the show. But it definitely does feel like already in this third episode, I'm starting to get a sense for like the motions that's like repeating itself again and again, like the whole poop jokes thing. Like it's been doing it for a while now. I'm getting a little tired, and yeah, the characters are kind of just these. They haven't really been revealed to have more sides to them. Even with other shows that are of a similar quality to this one, I feel like oftentimes there's the established like character dynamics that are very cliche, and then there's emotion to sort of subvert that a little bit, and like add some more depth to them, or at least more nuance to their interactions for more comedic potential. Like Asobi Asobase, I thought I quite enjoyed because I felt like as the show continued, it kept adding layers to the characters, and it just sort of got better progressively as it went on, because I wasn't the biggest fan of the show at the start, but like by the end I thought it was a solid, worthwhile, good time. Not perfect by any means, but it made me want to finish it. This show doesn't really, like, I can watch it. It's nice to watch. Like, it doesn't make me want to turn it off necessarily, but especially seeing as I'm sort of watching through all the shows of the year, I kind of can't help but think, well, this show doesn't, like, it doesn't make me want to turn it off, but it doesn't really make me want to, like, watch the next episode either. I feel like I've gotten pretty much what it's going for out of these 3 episodes, and I don't know that it's really gonna make me laugh much more than it already has. Visually, it's decent. The character animation is generally alright. There's a couple moments where it looks pretty off, but for the most part, it's solid. Nothing that really like grabbed me about it. Character designs are good. I'm not a fan of this type of look to the child characters, where it's like it's a little less stylized approach to like the lolly look. It's like slightly more realistic, but with the same proportions of like anime lollies. So they've got a little, like, they're like got bigger foreheads, and slightly smaller eyes, and their bodies are really skinny proportionally to the size of their giant heads. It's because they've got like slightly more realistic proportions to their bodies, but not their heads. It's kind of weird. I don't find it all that cute. I mean, they're cute occasionally, but I'm not a big fan of these particular designs. Even though Takagi from Takagi-san fits a lot of the things I just said, and I do like her design, but I think hers works because of her expressions. And these characters, none of their expressions really sell me. I don't really like their faces. They don't appeal to me. I like Nono. Nono's a good character. She has a good design. She's like, I remember her name, even though she's a side character. But she's like a black-haired, I think like middle schooler or high schooler. She reminds me of the future Mirai from the movie Mirai, which was a character I liked. Excuse me. But back on topic, visuals wise, like, animation, solid. Background art is kind of weird. So I can't tell if it's just they're being lazy or it's like a stylistic thing, because like a good half the backgrounds look like they just took photographs and then put like a couple filters on the images, and not like they look like it looks like that's what they did, even if I'm saying like, but it still probably was made. No, it literally looks like that is, like I'm saying, I'm pretty sure that's what they did. And I can't tell if I like it or don't like it or not yet. It's definitely strange, and there's quite a few scenes, especially scenes which are focused on the characters walking, and an emphasis on their feet. It never looks like they're actually walking on the ground. It looks like they're kind of like hovering above the ground, or they're on like a different plane. That's like my biggest complaint. But other than that, it's just sort of like a bright and cheery type of look to it. And the soundtrack is fun. It's upbeat. Didn't grab me. OP is probably the best part of the show. I like the OP a lot. And visually, the OP is fantastic. I think it looks really great. But yeah, this is just one of those shows it's good. It's fun. If you want something like this, I mean, it's not gonna hurt you. But there's just more of this out there that is doing it the same or better. So not a whole lot of point. And also, it doesn't have lowly vampires, which is what Tonari has, and that makes it better.